Ray Burnett and Mr. Mihir R. Bhatt. The issue has 18 articles from practitioners, academicians, researchers, as well as from subnational, national, and regional work. The contribution is from authorities, universities, networks, and CSOs. For ready reference, you have access to the issue from the chat box. Looking at time, let's begin. I request you all to please use the chat box for your introduction, comments, and question. We will have 7 minutes for each speaker, have some time for discussion at the end. Please use chat box for comments and questions. You can also share the web link of resources that you like to share with all of us. Let me first invite Dr. Nivedita S. Ray Bennett from ADN UK for keynote address. Dr. Nivedita is one of the leading forces in shaping ADN, which has more than 800 members dedicated to reducing avoidable deaths from hazards. Many thanks. Over to Dr. Nivedita, please. Dr. Nivedita? Okay, maybe she will join in coming couple of minutes. Meanwhile, as we have limited time, I would like to invite Dr. Rajvi Josipura from SEVA, who is very actively working with and for informal sector women workers and small businesses in urban and rural areas of several states of India. Dr. Josipura?
Thank you so much, Vishal bhai.
Over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to start by a brief introduction. So, I'm Dr. Rajvi Joshipura, and today I represent the 2.9 million women workers at SEVA. So, SEVA is basically a trade union of poor self-employed women who belong to the informal sector. And the membership spans across 18 states of India and neighboring countries, which include Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and Afghanistan. So our main objectives as an organization are full employment and social security, where we come together as poor, as women, as workers, no matter what caste, community, and religion we belong to. So, in reference to the present context, we are all aware that the frequency of climate shocks, including heat waves and irregular precipitation patterns, have been increasing. And India is experiencing a troubling surge in heat waves with devastating consequences, especially for the marginalized communities, and particularly women, to be very specific. And in 2022, we altogether reported 280 heat wave days in a time span of March 11 to May 18th, which is highest in the past 12 years. So to get to the bottom of the situation, SEVA took up a mixed approach, which included a series of focus group discussions and a heat wave impact survey with AIDMI. And this study surveyed a total of about 581 people. So, based on the study results, here are some key insights that we generated. So, the first one was that heat waves not only impact health and livelihoods, but various other aspects, which include food security, energy, education, and mental health. So, here are some numbers. So we asked members to be in specific members belonging to the informal sector economy, that how do heat waves impact their livelihood, to which 90% said that it was adversely impacted, and the reasons stated were that 79% said that it reduces work efficiency. Some of them stated that it has decreased work hours. And then there were increased expenses, and 43% said that reduced work days due to heat related illnesses. And then we focused on what are the challenges that face. So a huge majority, that is 69%, as you can see on the screen, said that they face direct heat exposure. Now, moving on to the next category, that was impact of heat waves on health. So the common symptoms they faced were headache, rashes, fever, dizziness, diarrhea, and vomiting. And about 38% also stated that it impacts their mental health. And for these informal sector women workers, when their livelihood is impacted, eventually it's all in a circle. And hence it started impacting their food and water security. So 60% members stated that their food gets spoiled, 27% were forced to consume spoiled food because were left with no option. And then 82% members stated that their water supply was adversely impacted. And the last was the impact on energy. So about 78% members stated that their electricity gets impacted. And 95% said that during the peak heat months, they don't like, it's a very abrupt supply. Sometimes it is available, sometimes it is not. And with increasing cooling demands, it is very difficult to meet these demands. So these were the results from the survey. That is the quantitative data we have to support our qualitative data. And based on focus groups, we divided the whole thing into three broad categories. The first one is the health impact. So what we observed and what our members stated was that increased temperatures have resulted in adverse health impacts. They don't have access to potable water. Many members fall into a cascade of heat related illnesses, which include heat cramps, heat exhaustion, dizziness, hypotension. They live in makeshift tin houses. So there is direct exposure to heat, as well as the tin gets heated up as well. So it becomes very difficult for them to survive in that. Then there were women members who work in salt pans, construction sites, shipyards, and they are exposed to heat, like direct heat, when they are forced to handle metal machines, leading to dermatological issues, hand blisters, and then increased waterborne illnesses because of the poor quality water. There were, during one of the interactions, there were two anecdotes that touched our heart. The first one was, we asked one of the member that why do you have to resort to so much substance abuse and chewing tobacco, to which they said that then we don't have access to ample food, so in order to suppress our hunger, we are using this as a resort. Then there are lack of resources. One or two cases were observed in 2022 wherein members fell down from the scaffolding and they lost their lives. Additionally, heat waves have also been impacting pregnant women. Then the next is impact on food security. So during one of the focus groups, one farmer sister said that whenever we wake up, the only prayer that we have in our hands is that, dear God, we may wake up hungry, but please ensure that we do not have to go to bed hungry. So, what is happening is, with increased food insecurity and lack of access to nutritious food, heat waves and climate change is further perpetuating a cycle of poverty and vulnerability in these communities. There is, it leads to food spoilage, crop loss, uh, rising foodborne illnesses, wherein members have to cut back on their consumption. Also, due to loss of livelihoods, they are not able to afford two square meals and hence have been falling into a vicious cycle of malnutrition. So, not taking much time, I would like to share a couple of points on how can we prevent these adverse impacts. The first one is building social safety nets. So this includes where this includes taking steps towards increasing their access to micro insurance or community based savings. For example, in 2023, starting 5th May to 30th June, which is the peak heat season here in India, Seva piloted the extreme heat micro insurance. wherein members from 8 different trades and five, wherein members from 8 different states, 8 different trades and 5 different districts were involved. And this was the first ever heat linked micro insurance product for the informal sector. And the product was structured to trigger when a specific heat conditions were met based on the satellite data. And then the payments were to be directly credited to the member's bank account. So the main aim behind having this program in place was that members don't have to choose between staying safe or working in these adverse weather conditions. Additionally, the program also included procurement and distribution of various wrap-around interventions, which would minimize the direct impacts of heat on health and increase their work efficiency, minimizing their livelihood losses. So these protective equipments included solar lanterns, insulated water jugs, tarpaulin sheets, and umbrellas. Because many members complained, especially in the salt pan workers, that the water we drink and the chai that they drink, there is no difference in that temperature. So, in order to help them maintain ambient water temperatures, this was necessary. And last but not the least, towards the end of the program, it provided financial inclusion because many women members don't have access to finances. Then the next one is that health is a very key asset for our members. Hence, to improve access to healthcare during extreme heat, Seva took up interventions like setting up of community solar water coolers or procurement of underground cement tanks. And we have our own cadre of community grassroots leaders. So this cadre functions on training of trainer module, wherein they are trained by a Seva team of doctors on various climate related illnesses, including heat waves. And after getting this information, they'll mobilize within the community, conduct small community meetings, door to door visits, disseminate posters, GIFs, and key messages so that members are well aware of the symptoms, the preventive measures for the heat wave, and can take them as and when necessary. Additionally, we had a telemedicine service in place wherein members could get in touch with the doctor or without stepping out or having to travel long distances. So, given the vulnerability of the marginalized communities, it was very necessary. And from other health perspective, what we feel is that there is a need to advocate for deploying mobile medical vans, especially that are tailored for addressing heat-related health concerns among poor marginal workers. And these should be equipped with trained medical staff, cooling facilities, or just providing timely assistance during heat waves at various workplaces. Additionally, in regions that are prone to frequent heat exposure, which include salt pans or the construction sites, it is necessary that the midday meal schemes are in place, especially for the students. So it includes hydrating fluids such as water or ORS. And last but not the least, it is very necessary that we safeguard the lives of all the members, and hence we need to strengthen the local heat wave early warning system. Our research states that early summers and high temperatures have have seen more heat wave deaths compared to that during the later stages. Reason being plain and simple that the human body adapts. Hence the need is to prioritize.
Dr. Joshipura?
Yes. Hello.
Yes, now we can listen.
Yeah. Okay. So lastly, to safeguard the lives of poor marginal workers, it is necessary that we strengthen the local heat wave warning systems. The reason being that there's a research which states that early summers have seen more heat wave deaths comparison to the late summers. The reason being plain and simple that at a later stage human body learns to adapt. But before reaching that stage, we can prioritize enhancing local bodies and mechanisms which are responsible for disseminating timely and accurate warnings. which include the preventive measures in local languages, like what to do, when to do, how to do. And it shouldn't be only messages, but we should be converting those measures into actionable steps. And it so having these in local languages, vernacular languages, helps these vulnerable communities to take prompt actions. So I would just like to end by saying that ensuring participation of informal women workers in decision making process and having them at the front line of heat wave action, including the development of heat action plans, can play a vital role. Their empowerment and inclusion will not only catalyze grassroots movements, but will blend indigenous wisdom, help them generate alternative livelihoods with modern sustainability measures for resilient futures. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Joshipura. Very useful and latest data and facts that you have shared. And another side is that we always see and read and most of the time women as a vulnerable group need to reach out them, but on the other side their contribution is high in terms of local economy, in terms of childcare, to ensure the food security as well as also contribution in the livelihood. By this way, protecting them in heat wave is very important, crucial by every aspect. Now, I hope Dr. Nibedita, you can hear us. And oh, hello. Yes, thank you for joining. We missed you in the beginning part, but now welcoming you and would like to request you for the opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishal. So, Vishal, am I allowed to share the slides? Because the slides just disappeared for the previous speaker. So I'm going to try to share my screen and see if I could.
Yes.
Okay, just bear with me for a minute. Can you see?
Yes. Now, yes. Yes, we can see.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, thank you very much, Vishal, and also Mihir Bhai for the invitation. And I'm really sorry to all the audience that I could not be in time. I had some technical problem to join, but I'm here now. So thank you for joining. My name is Nibedita Ray Bennett, and I am an associate professor in risk management based at the University of Leicester School of Business in the UK. And I'm also one of the founding presidents of the Avoidable Deaths Network. We also call it ADN. So move to the next one. So what I'll do, very briefly introduce ADN. Maybe some of you don't know about ADN because ADN is based in the UK and Japan. So I would take this opportunity to introduce very briefly and then give a little context of the newsletter. So a little bit about ADN. So ADN is a global and local network of experts, practitioners, and researchers interested in avoiding human deaths from natural hazards, naturally triggered technological hazards, and human-made hazards in low and middle-income countries. We also work in high-income countries such as Japan and the United Kingdom, where I'm based. ADN was launched in 2019 at the 4th Summit of the Global Alliance for Disaster Risk Institutes in Kyoto in Japan. So this year we marked the 5th year for ADN.
Madam, it is still in first slide.
First slide. Then why is it not? Maybe. Don't know. Can you see the slide now? It's moving at my end. Still
in the first.
How do we move on?
Can you close and reopen and use the, instead of, if not keyboard, then directly through?
Directly.
Yes.
Can you see now?
Yes.
You can see the first slide, yeah?
Yes.
Let's go to the second slide. You can see now?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll keep it like that way. So the second slide is about the ADN members. So we have about 800 members, little over 800 members from 94 countries. The top 10 countries are largely from the low and middle income countries, with the exception of the UK. So we are in our members are stretched out across 94 countries, which is nearly 48% of the 195 countries. And these 195 countries are the UN recognized countries. There are so many other countries which are not recognized by the United Nations. So yeah, largely from the low and middle income countries, with the exception of the United Kingdom. Okay, so let's move to the next one. Okay, so ADN is often misunderstood as an NGO, foundation, trust, but it's not. ADN is just based at two academic universities, Leicester in the UK, where I work, and Kansai University in Japan. Leicester offers a number of courses, for instance, MSc in Risk, Crisis and Disaster Management. It's a distance learning program. I launched it in 2020. I was a program director for nearly 7 years. I stepped down on 31st of March. We also offer PhD in management. Kansai University offers a suite of BSc, MSc, PhD in safety science. And if you're interested to find out more about our courses, please feel free to drop me an email and we'll be able to put you in touch with the relevant contacts. ADN is a member of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. We are part of the Sendai Voluntary Commitments, and our commitments are for Sendai Target A and B. Sendai Target A is, here you could see, substantially reduce global disaster mortality by 2030. And Target B is about substantially reduce the number of people affected by disasters by 2030. But these two targets work in interface with the Sustainable Development Goals, so there are 4 of them. Number 3, good health and well-being. 11, sustainable cities. 13, climate action. And 17. And the newsletter, in a way, covers SDG 2, SDG 11, 13, and 17. So it's a perfect newsletter that AIDIMA has released it. So what do we do? So what is our purpose? A little bit about it. We just looked that thing. So ADN's purpose is to help policymakers, researchers, practitioners, and at-risk community make better decisions to save lives and reduce injuries to achieve sustainable development. So on the left-hand side, and I have used the terminology quite a few times, which is avoidable deaths. So the way we define it, our working definition is that avoidable deaths are premature deaths that could be avoided through preventable, amenable, which is basically treatable, and governance-related measures. These are 3 main reasons why we focus on avoidable deaths. Firstly, that reducing avoidable deaths is a matter of social justice, because a burden of these deaths is carried largely by the vulnerable sections of society, and justice can be redressed by drawing attention to these premature deaths so that the capacity of disaster and health management systems can be developed, as well as context-specific solutions can be put in place to save lives. Secondly, we also believe that 0 casualties is a reasonable target than 0 damage. And thirdly, avoidable deaths directly contribute to the Sendai Framework's target A and B, which I showed you the slide, and also several SDGs, 3, 11, 13, and 17. And the second column is why networks. I think network is very important. We take it very seriously. And we think that networking can really contribute to reducing disaster deaths. And I think the newsletter is an excellent example how different individuals from different organizations came together. And it was partly done because of our networking, AIDM's networking and ADN's networking. So networking can contribute to really pressing issues of the 21st centuries and beyond. So we have different types of networks consisting of various types of individuals. There is a saying that each one of us has more than 800 networks, and these multiple memberships of a network can bring new insights. And the newsletter, once again, is a fantastic testament for that. And we can learn mutually from each other's overlapping ideas and networks. I believe that ADN is an arena where people can communicate and interact with others to get new insights to reduce avoidable deaths. So in this slide, ADN itself is a network. In addition, we also build networks to reduce avoidable deaths. And you could see in the extreme right-hand column, we do a number of research projects such as snakebite deaths, drowning deaths, tsunami deaths, maternal deaths, and we have formed small networks in our respective countries wherever we work. So therefore, ADN is a network and also build networks at local and national level. I'm also very pleased to let you know that, yes, we have been a member of UNDRR's anti-voluntary platform for the past 2 years, but last week also we became a member of the UN OCHA, which is United Nations Office for Coordination for the Humanitarian Affairs. That is UN OCHA, and from next year onwards, we will be able to have our own seminars and sessions in Geneva, and you all are welcome to, submit abstracts, sessions, and so on and so forth. And we will advertise that nearer to the event, at least 3 to 4 months in advance. We know the date for the next seminars conference will be from 18th to 25th of March. Hopefully 3 months in advance, we will be inviting abstracts. So please stay in tune and follow ADN if you are not. We'll be able to provide you more information on that. So to implement ADN's philosophy of networking, we are experimenting with 2 different types of networking models. One is called KEN, which is Knowledge Extension Network, which is the 3rd column you could see, and the second is the Local Level Action Network, and that is called LAN. So the KEN is largely designed for, technical experts, where we want to find out yet unknown issues related to avoidable deaths. Whereas for the LAN is for the high-risk groups who are carrying the burden of avoidable deaths. And here, mostly, we try to find solutions where the issues are known and solutions can be put in place. Both networking models are in its embryonic stage. We are experimenting. We did experiment KEN in the Caribbean region, and then we did a little bit of experiment in India across 3 states for snake bites. And the LAN, we are currently experimenting for snake bites in the state of Orissa in collaboration with our ADN India Hub, which is led by Orissa State Volunteer Social Workers Association. So what do we do? As you would see on the right-hand side, we have a global campaign which launched last year on 12th of March, and it's called International Awareness Day for Avoidable Deaths. It's celebrated on 12th of March. Because our members are scattered all around the world, so this year we marked the 1st anniversary, and we celebrated throughout March. So we had more than 33 activities across 13 plus countries. And I think this newsletter is one of the outcome of that. And I'm very grateful to All India Institute of Disaster Management Institute and the colleagues of Mihir Bhai who took on this global campaign on board. And this newsletter is one of the outcomes of that global campaign. We also do research on snake bite deaths, drowning deaths, tsunami deaths, and I've already told you. Some knowledge exchange events, outreach events. We also have a future leader and junior champion schemes. If anybody is interested, please look up our website. There's more information on that. Okay. So here I have got only 3 slides, and I just thought this slide is going to be interesting to share it with you. So look what's happening around the world. These are the cause of death that were being published by IFRC in 2014, and this is the data from the 20th century. And I find it quite fascinating, partly because it tells us a lot as to what were the causes of death in the 20th century. We do not have the statistics for the 21st century yet. Maybe IFRC might bring it out when we move on to the 22nd century. And if I'm alive in 22nd century, I should be able to share this slide. But this is from the 20th century, and look at the big circles with regard to the attribution of death. So we could see NCDA, non-communicable disease, killing. Yeah, we could also see infectious diseases are killing. We also see humanities, which are related to drugs and various other things, cancer. Now, there is something here right on the top, which is related to health complications, about 270 million people dead. And I really don't know, is that where the heatwave deaths were being counted for? We don't know the details. I don't know whether this would also come under NCD. I'm not sure. But, this, because heatwave is not something that I have worked on, but it's fantastic to get involved through this newsletter and learn a little bit more about heatwave research and the practical implications on health. So it could come under health complications. It could come under NCD because heat creates so many other things, to breathe and so on and so forth. But my research has always been on the second slide. I'm always fascinated by the natural world. Yeah, so under the natural world, we have the disasters. My expertise are on disaster risk reduction and international development at the interface with public health. And you could see the animal, the world, a significant number of people are dying from that. And we found that, snake bites has been a major cause, not a major, one of the leading causes of disaster deaths, which are largely known as indirect disaster deaths. But yeah, I have always been fascinated by the natural world. But I think for the heat wave related issues and heat wave related deaths, maybe it is largely here that the IFRC's report provides some vital statistics on that. This is just a tile from our global campaign. You might have seen it, International Awareness Day, and our 2 tiles on the right-hand side is about the disaster deaths are avoidable. We do believe that disaster deaths are avoidable. So a little bit about the newsletter led by All India Institute. It's a fantastic initiative. I had the opportunity or a privilege to be the guest editor. I was able to bring some of our ADN members to write few publications. You will read that. So this newsletter has 16 articles, absolutely fascinating, easy to read, short articles, sharp, precise, and there is something for everyone to take home. Be you are an academic, non-academic, just a general citizen. There's something in that newsletter, and I found it very useful when I reviewed all the articles. 16 articles written by more than 20 authors. So lots of authors. Some are senior academics, others are early career researchers, and still others are just budding researchers. And, some are also practitioners. And I saw Sewa was there. It was fantastic to hear Sewa's research on women. I've always been a big follower of Sewa since my PhD. It's great. Sewa and All India Institute Disaster Management are doing fantastic research on that. And I found out that we have 20 plus authors, but they are from 4 countries. So most of the case studies have come from 4 different countries, largely from South Asia and few from Europe. Now, as you would know that I'm an avoidable deaths person, so we usually use these 4 important questions to assess or evaluate any projects or any project proposals or the work that I am doing. So these are the 4 important questions. One is, who is carrying the most burden of avoidable disaster deaths? In this context is the heatwave date. What are the causes and circumstances surrounding avoidable disaster deaths? Who is responsible for reducing avoidable disaster deaths? And how can avoidable disaster deaths be reduced? And I think this newsletter provides answers to all these questions. I found answers for all these questions. So this is why I would really recommend to all of you to read it, circulate it, share it. There are some important top tips. So this is why there's everything there. For example, let's move on to the first one. Who is carrying the most burden of avoidable disaster deaths? So number 1, we found there are lots of articles which are talking that tribal people are carrying the most burden. And then we also found other vulnerable groups such as daily laborers, small vendors, economically and socially marginalized urban settlements, living in informal settlements, children, elderly, people with chronic illness. They are largely carrying the heat wave death. So if you have friends, family who belong to that category, please look after them, because the heat waves have already started in India and it's not going to stop yet until the monsoon season comes. Please spread the words as an ambassador for this newsletter and also for this very resourceful book that AIDMA has produced. The second is about what are the causes and circumstances. This has been actually fantastic to read, and I found out that there are lots of circumstances. For example, you would find occupation, place of your residence, socioeconomic status, pre-existing morbidities, vulnerability by age, environmental risk, and individual and the community's risk-taking behaviors. All of those things can contribute in terms of exacerbating and also mitigating the impact of heat waves. So once again, there are lots of takeaways. So please read the newsletters and spread the words, because it is all about saving lives. It's not just a newsletter that should sit on the shelf and do nothing. We all should act, because we are all going through and experiencing this heat wave. So let us take some actions by spreading the words and taking those mitigation measures that our co-authors have provided. We also found who is responsible. It's fantastic to read once again that this is a problem that does not sit in one sector. It does not sit within one individual's remit. it does not sit with one sector and one discipline. It's multi-sectoral, it's cross organizations. It is not just someone only who sits, who are in the urban area in a nice AC room, but it affects everyone. So it's a hazard that is experienced by everyone. So the decision making does not sit with one individual. It sits with a number of individuals and organizations. So it is cross-sectoral, multi-stakeholder, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary. So it's quite challenging. So it's very, you have to have that kind of a systems thinking to understand what the subsystems are lacking, which subsystems need to be updated, and what needs to be done so that one individual doesn't die of a heat stroke. So, it's quite systemic. And when the issues are systemic, it is very difficult to come up with one solution. And yet, we need a solution. So we need to reduce somehow some of those abstract ideas into a kind of implementation, which is actionable solutions. So to do that, our authors provide excellent approaches and ideas for that. So if you are an academic, you will be able to take away some of the theories that some of our authors have proposed. For example, Christian Morgner talks about cultural theory, fantastic tool to assess and understand the impact of heat wave. Fernandez talks about a whole of society approach. Once again, fascinating. We have AIDMI's strength-based appreciative inquiry approach, and I think they did this with SEWA. We have the Kerala State Disaster Management Authority's very, very proactive approach. Fantastic, lots of ideas in how to mitigate the impact of heat wave. And finally, the data science. The data science can also inform decision-making approaches and then take actionable solutions. So there's a takeaway for the academics here. And also there are some takeaways for the practitioners. For instance, there are lots of evidence-based strategies, plans, and actions for self-care. For self-care, as I said, heat wave is experienced by everyone. So there are some self-care tactics that are also collective care tactics to mitigate the impact of heat waves. And these tactics have largely come from the indigenous community, from the tribal communities. But we can also learn from them. The mainstream society can also take on some of the mitigating strategies that the traditional and the indigenous communities are doing it. And also we have AIDIMA's heat wave early warning system, 8 preventable strategies to reduce heat wave related deaths, and also guides from Red Cross and Red Crescent branches and others. So I would say, please read them if you're interested. One or the other approach might be, attractive to you. For some practitioners, the strategies might be attractive to you. Please share this information with your colleagues, friends, family, and others. So I think with that note, I have to end. We all know the environment, our human-built environment, we built that system is getting hotter and hotter every day, and it will continue to become hotter due to the climate change. It will affect not just humans, but also animals. Especially I'm interested in snakes. You might have more encounter with snakes. You might have more encounter with water. This also increases exposure to risks and hazards of different types. And there are also very interesting takeaways in terms of how the heat wave affects our mind and body and what you can do. So I think with that note, I'm going to stop. And I would say it's an excellent resource for everybody to read. But at the same time, the reading must have some sort of, as I said, actions. You share that knowledge with your friends, family, network, colleagues, so that we can save lives in this summer and also in the future summers as well. So with that note, many congratulations to All India Disaster Management Institute for releasing this absolutely amazing newsletter and also celebrating ADN's global campaign. And finally, thank you to all the participants. And I think it's a big number, more than 130. So many congratulations to you all as well for joining this launching event. And thank you very much. And if you haven't followed or following ADN, please feel free to visit our website and also share information about ADN with your friends, colleagues. So thank you very much and namaskar. Over to you, Vishal.
Thank you so much. Really very energetic and required, especially in terms of convergence of SFDR, Sendai framework, and SDGs. That is really important for all of us to incorporate in our action, in our planning. And without that, zero casualty cannot be achieved. So thank you for your opening remarks. Looking at time, now would like to invite Dr. Nishant Saxena from ICMR with very rich experience, long experience in terms of tribal and health aspects. Over to you, Dr. Nishant.
Thank you so much. I think I am audible.
Yes, very clearly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. I'll just share my screen very briefly. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you so much for inviting me and for making me part of this wonderful roundtable, which the AIDMI has organized on this very, I will say, a very timely intervention on your part, because both the newsletter about which our keynote speaker, Dr. Bennett, was talking about has been very beautifully tuned to this whole issue of avoidable deaths because of heat wave. So just as Dr. Bennett was talking about the various vulnerable sections of population, which are more susceptible to heat wave mortalities and morbidities. So the tribes in India, the Adivasis, are certainly one of them. And as we all know, in India, there are about 705 tribal groups, or the scheduled tribes, as we call them, the Adivasi. And the number is not so small. According to the 2011 census, we had around 104 million tribal people in India. So it is almost much more than the population of many of the European countries. So the indigenous population in India is very strong, and it is also quite mobilized today. So when it comes to the problem of heat wave, I will just try to briefly touch upon few aspects, especially how the tribals are using their knowledge, their traditional knowledge, to actually encounter the heat wave situation. So, like if you look at the map on the right-hand side, it is actually depicting the heat wave vulnerability index of India across the 640 districts. And it was a beautiful study done by Azhar et al. In 2017. And the red parts are those where there is more vulnerability towards heat wave. And the mortalities and health hazards are much more in those red sections. So if you look at the map, the central part of India is where there is more vulnerability, very high vulnerability. And we all know that during the course of last 10 to 20 years, in fact, in this new century, the average temperature of Earth has gone beyond much what it was expected. And probably 2023 has been slated to be the most hottest year of this century so far. And similarly, this year also, it is prediction that the days of heat wave will be much more than it was in the previous years. So obviously, the heat wave is having serious drastic consequences, including the health hazards on humans and animals.
Sorry,
So
in between, I'm interrupting. Can you make a full slideshow, if possible, please? Thank you.
Okay, just let me stop sharing and I will again share. Is it done?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. So, like I was telling that the central part of India is where most of the problem is there, the central and the northern parts. And this is where the tribes of India, the Adivasis, are inhabiting these areas particularly. So when we as researchers go in these areas for conducting community-based studies, we often find that these populations are indeed more susceptible to heat waves. But at the same time, we face that there is a lot of resource crunch in these areas. So the question is, how are they kind of managing it? But as we all know, the tribes are not new to these environmental conditions. They have been there since time immemorial, and it is their traditional knowledge and wisdom which has coming to their rescue. So what aspects of traditional knowledge and wisdom are they really using to cope up with the situation is something which I will very briefly touch. But mind you, we have not done any focused study or research on this aspect. I have just tried to collate the information which I have and made some observations in the past several years of my own fieldwork experiences. So I've tried to just gather the whole thing and put it in front of you. And just let me tell you that my institute, I am working for the Indian Council of Medical Research at the National Institute for Research in Tribal Health. So my institute is having the mandate from the Government of India to work exclusively on the health of tribes for the betterment of tribal health. And we have been doing this since past 40 years. And we have been doing studies on the various infectious diseases, the non-infectious diseases, the lifestyle diseases, etc., along with some of uh, the issues which are coming up. So I think heat wave effect on tribal population is something which we can certainly look into in near future. So when we look at the tribal population, they are actually the living repositories of traditional knowledge, and which has enabled their survival. And this traditional knowledge is multifaceted. So if you look at the kind of homes they live in, the kind of clothing and personal protections they are using, how they're managing their water, what are their dietary practices, the traditional herbal knowledge which they have, the healing practices they have. Together, using all these things, they are able to cope up with the adverse situations like the heat waves. But the question is that how we can take the message from the tribal community, that how we can take these traditional knowledges and make it available to other communities also. Because the thing is that we often feel that, no, these are people who are living in remote areas, they don't know much, but it is not like that. They have many good health practices which can be taken up by the other communities, the mainstream society, and that can actually help us also to kind of fight the situation which we have at our hands. But the problem there is whether these notions, these traditional knowledges being used by the tribes, will they be accepted by the mainstream? And the answer is that we need to do more research on that. We need to document and validate the traditional health practices, and so that we can lend a kind of credibility to such practices. And then slowly, using the IEC method, that is information, education, and communication strategies, we can make the other communities also uh, aware about such uh, knowledge. So if you look at these pictures, the first and the second picture, these are the hut models or the habitat models of two different communities. One is the Baga tribe of Madhya Pradesh, the other is the Saharia tribe of Madhya Pradesh. Actually, we were doing one of the projects in our institute under which we had to build these structures. So these structures are actually there in my own institute. And if anybody is coming here, we can make you, I mean, you can always go and see this institute, these huts. So what you can find is that they are totally different from each other, but they are living in these structures. The tribes are living in these structures for a long time. And actually they are getting the protection from the environment to a certain extent. Apart from that, you also come across the various headgears which these different tribes are using. So for example, the Baga tribe, they are using this circular kind of headgear on top of their head, which is made from the local plants. While if you look at the Bishnoi tribe in Rajasthan, they are using this kind of safa, this kind of pagadi as they call it. So this turban is used by them. Similarly, the tribes are also using various herbal formulations to help them cope up with the heat. And also you can find different kind of indigenous drinks, which are very famous in these tribal groups. So say, for example, the bale sharbat, the wood apple sharbat is very famous for helping to mitigate the heat effects. Similarly, the raab, which is used in Rajasthan a lot, raab is made of corn and buttermilk. So this is very helpful for uh, coping up the heat environment. And the points which I want to highlight is that we need to kind of uh, aggregate more structured data on both mortality and morbidity. So if you can remember, the keynote speaker was talking about different circles, but we don't know where exactly the heat wave mortality and morbidity lies, in which circle that is. So we need to collect more data, and we can then kind of come up with better heat vulnerability index, which kind of prepares us for future eventualities. And we also need this index at the level of sub-district levels. So it is not just a district level, but the sub-district level kind of data that will be helpful for policy making and for making the best use of the resources available. And I feel that it is high time to connect with the tribal communities, raise awareness about the good practices which are prevalent in the tribal communities, do more research on these practices, and then using the health communication strategies, we can always mainstream those practices and help people to cope up with the situation. So we need to take more nuanced research on heat wave situation in India. And by combining all these aspects, which includes education, community engagement, policy advocacy, and by kind of propagating the age-old health measures of tribes, then I think we will be able to beat the heat. And this is Beat the Heat is actually one of the reports which you can find on the website of Ministry of Home Affairs, which talks about how India is kind of dealing with this situation. So that is all from my side. And if anybody is interested to look at more of our work, they can go to our website, which is www.nirth.res.in. And I was helped in this endeavor of mine. I mean, you can find our article in the newsletter of AIDMI. And I thank Arpit Maurya and Shruti Singh for helping me with both the presentation today and as well as the article. So thank you so much, Vishalji, for inviting me. And I will be happy to take the questions later.
Thank you. Thanks to you for really concrete contribution, because many times in heat wave preparedness, we talking about specific vulnerable population. And here, this is the specific group where we need to focus, tribal. And what should be the specific communication strategy, what should be our good practices that needs to promote and strengthen with this particular community are really important. And you covered these area aspects very well. Thank you so much. Looking at time, let's move on. Would like to invite Dr. Liao from University of Leicester, UK. Hello, Doctor.
Hello, and
Yes.
I'm not I'm hi everyone, and today's my honor to have this opportunity to give a short presentation about the newsletter. Let me first share my screen.
Yes, we can see. If possible, please
Yeah,
make it
okay.
full
Yeah.
slideshow. Thanks.
I already make it as a presentation view, so can anybody like see it well? Okay. My name is Jane now, and I'm a first-year PhD student in University of Leicester, and supervised by Samuel Tai, and also supervised by Dr. Nebadika Rabenate. Today is my honor to have this opportunity to give this short presentation about this newsletter, the mitigating heatwave impacts and some sustainable solution for the urban environment. So I'm going to the next page. Here comes some background information here. Studies from various regions around the world suggest that with the ongoing climate changes, the frequency and the intensity of the heat wave has been increasing over the years. Last year's, I mean, the years of 2023 become the hottest years on record, with the record is being projected to be broken under the ongoing global warming in the future. As for the brief overview of the harms of climate change-induced heat waves on the human's life, I will take the European heat waves in summer of 2022 as an example. As we can see from the figure, the baseline temperature were computed as the mean annual circle of observed temperature in the reference period in past 13 years. In 2022, mid-July to the mid-August, had a significant higher temperature than the reference period. Meanwhile, in this period, the heat-related mortality accounted for the near 2/3 of the overall summer. In that summer, over 16,000 of heat-related deaths were estimated in Europe. The loss of life caused by heat wave is clear and obvious. And generally, active cooling strategies such as air conditioning can potentially protect health from extremely hot weather, but it will also cause a sharp increase in energy demand, and therefore they may contribute to the global warming effect. Also, there are accessibility and inequality issues will happen, as not every household will be able to afford an air conditioner at home. Here comes a figure from the International Energy Agency. Clearly shows that the coverage of the air conditioner in many high temperature areas does not reach the people who need the cooling, and there is an obvious regional imbalance. Therefore, it is important to find a sustainable and potentially scalable solution to mitigating the adverse health impact from extremely hot weather in the future.
Sorry to interrupt you. This is a presenter view. If you can make it a full view, we can see the notes and slides.
Okay, so I will send it to the
Perfect. Thank you.
the full view, right? So
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
so here comes the.
Okay.
Does it works right now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So here is the first possible sustainable solution for directly reduce the indoor high temperature exposure in the urban areas, the nature-based solution. The NBS can be defined as the approaches that use the power of the nature to address the various environmental challenges, which is the high temperature in this context. As suggested in the 2023 Heat Resilience and Sustainable Cooling report published by the UK Environmental Audit Committee, NBS such as parks, trees, water bodies, they have the significant cooling effects and potentially decreasing heat-related deaths on population level. For instance, the green roofs we can see from this picture. It can provide the thermal resistance to building during the heat wave, cooling indoor temperatures by up to 15 degrees centigrade. And also the green space can absorb dust and the particle from the air, enhancing air quality and promoting the healthier environment. Green roofs can also absorb the sound waves, effectively reducing the noise level and creating the quieter indoor space. NBS like tree, parks, and water bodies contributed to improved mental health by creating pleasing environments that reduce the mental stress. It can moderate factors which I just mentioned are potentially associated with the heat-related deaths. However, the challenges is some countries didn't fully on board because the things like the ongoing maintenance cost and the high cost at the build-up stages. So we really need research from the local source to figure out how to make the MBS work best in each place and save life from the indoor extreme heat. Here comes the second solutions that even though the MBS can reduce the deadly impacts of heat waves, but the implementing these measures on the large scales isn't simple as flipping a switch. It takes time and it takes the labor force. So a timely and target heat wave warning system for the entire population, especially the vulnerable groups, is crucial to prevent the immediate health impact of heat wave. The very first thing we need to do is to find out who need to be reached out, like such as, sorry. Okay.
यहाँ नहीं है
Okay, so such as children and elderly people, people with chronic health conditions and people with no social economic status are generally more often to identify as the vulnerable groups of heatwave exposure. Due to various factors, including limited access to resource and the poor housing conditions, this requires a deeper understanding of the unique vulnerabilities and the behavioral patterns of different groups during the heatwave. By collecting and analyzing data on heat-related illness and deaths, researchers can identify behavioral patterns and risk factor to inform the design of the warning messages. On the other hand, general warning like the television and the radio broadcast may not effectively reach with this population. So for effective communicating the information, we need to consider about how will this group access to the information, and is this information provided relevant to the needs of the target population groups, and is the information clearly understandable by people who need it, and can this group take action based on the information provided? For each of above, consider the different needs of the different communities. Some channels of the communication may reach certain section of the population more effectively than others. For example, older ages groups may watch TV or listen to radio broadcast intensively, but younger people may easier to engage by social media. For those we call the people with limited information asset resources, bespoke communication by the dedicated people in the community will be more effective. So this, however, we would require intensive research in each of the subgroup among the population to guarantee evidence to identify the vulnerable groups and inform the warning systems. So the last solution that I proposed is still reducing the misinformation, and provide effective education on how to avoid heat stress is a sustainable measure to significantly reduce avoidable death from the heat wave. A heat education program led by the community health workers, also as a randomized control trial, suggests that heat wave knowledge education can reduce summer hospital visit by 38% and improve in the heat wave knowledge and the cooling practice. Such as education should focus on the directly communicating with the target population group. People need to understand how high in temperature will impact their own health in the individual level. Suggestions and at the individual level should remain clear and simple. Here we can see a simple example for a poster saying that we should drink enough water, wearing light-colored clothes, and avoiding direct sunlight. It's quite easy to understand, right? So on the other hand, the local non-government organization or community leaders can help provide a more local understanding of the preference of the different communities. The Heatwave Action Plan in Western Sydney in Australia had already called for leaders of all levels of organizations to work together to raise the awareness of the urban heat issue and promote the behavior change and also support the community engagement. So in conclusion, by empowering the individual with knowledge and resources, we can significantly decrease the avoidable death from the heat wave, fostering a more sustainable and a resilient society. So here is the reference list of this slide, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Leo, for sharing your perspective on nature-based solution, as well as also about the prioritizing. So that is very important aspect that we all need to focus while planning any action. Thank you so much. Now would like to invite Mr. Asis Ghadiali. Last but very important aspect of displacement that he's going to share with us. Thank you. Over to Dr. Asis. I think you are mute. Yes.
Great. Can you and if I
Yes, we can hear you, and it is in full slide. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks so much for the invitation. I mean, I'm learning so much from every presentation today and in the publication. So, you know, great, much gratitude to, well, to both the ADN and to the All India Disaster Mitigation Institute. I should probably correct the introduction. I'm not a doctor and not really an academic. My engagement in this work is really as a co-author of the recent study in Nature quantifying the human cost of global warming, which was led by the climate scientist Tim Lenton at the University of Exeter, who is also a kind of leading authority on the global tipping points agenda. And it really came about as a collaboration from my role as political strategy lead for the COP26 Civil Society Coalition in the run-up to COP26 in 2021, where I was in a kind of role of interfacing between colleagues from the Climate Vulnerable Forum and from Global South negotiating teams and the UK presidency, and really looking at the question of 1.5, which at the time the UK presidency and other global North countries were quite keen to remove as a kind of benchmark that people would be thinking about climate action. That their feeling was that we would fail to achieve 1.5, and that people around the world, or people in the global North particularly, would be demoralized by the failure to achieve that target. And that obviously sits that position, which is a kind of political position, sits obviously in counterpoint with the existential threat experienced around global warming and particularly the breaching of 1.5 of the most vulnerable communities, and particularly in the global South. What was interesting to me from the vantage point as a kind of essentially as a grassroots activist interfacing with the experts was that while that they were actually at the time able to articulate the idea of not aiming for 1.5 as a kind of economic prudence, as an economic common sense. They said that it would cost the global economy too much to attempt to limit global warming to 1.5, and it amazed me as I kind of interrogated decision makers, but also the climate scientists on whose expertise these decision makers were relying, that actually nobody could answer the question for me of how much it would cost to limit global warming, how much it would cost the global economy when we breach 1.5 degrees, and so out of that a kind of collaboration began with Tim Lenton, who one, it was in which Tim articulated to me his understanding of the reasons for that failure of the climate science community, the climate economics community, and global leadership to to understand the common sense that obviously global warming is in the long run going to cost all of us much more than to limit global warming. And he kind of traced it back to the dominant climate model in climate economics, which had been driven by the 2018 Nobel Prize winner William Nordhaus, who had effectively argued in his with his dice model, for example, he had essentially used existing GDP mechanisms to imagine that economic growth continues as we imagine it, and that we could just add an additional factor to account for the limit of climate change. In 2008-9, his DICE model therefore predicted that it would cost that limiting global warming to 1.5 was too expensive, and then the use of that model by governments and businesses led to the standoff that we saw at Copenhagen in 2009, but continues to inform government and business decision making. We still don't have a model that actually gives us a kind of more accurate picture of the costs of global warming. And so with Tim Lenton as the kind of leader of this academic project, we started to look at other ways of modeling cost and climate change, and have through this study, which was published in Nature Sustainability in last year, proposed a metric called the human climate niche. We essentially look at displacement or projected displacement in the kind of the section of the Earth's surface that has historically been habitable to human beings. We have currently seen in the movement in heat since 2000 from 1.1 we haven't yet to 1.2. We've currently seen around 50 million people around the world displaced outside the human climate niche. Now, that doesn't mean what it is often reported to, and which I think this title in some ways perhaps misleads. That doesn't mean 50 million people have moved. It means that they were once inhabiting an area that was inside the human climate niche, and they are now living outside of the human climate niche. Those places are Andhra Pradesh in India, the Chad Basin, and also the Ethiopia, Somali, and Sudanese border. So these are areas of extreme vulnerability and where forced migration might be an outcome, but equally so is infant mortality or high mortality rates, or morbidity rates, or many of the aspects of heatwave impacts that we're talking about today. And the map that you're looking at now essentially presents our findings, our projections for what that displacement starts to look like. So the area that you can see in purple becomes areas outside the human climate niche. We would anticipate that to be about 200 million people displaced outside the human climate niche. That was at 1.5. 2.7 degrees C is where current where current commitments on carbon reduction would lead us by the year 2100, by the end of the century. You'll see that from 1.5 to where we currently are in the carbon mitigation scenario, that we're looking at vastly greater areas. You will see that areas that you might recognize, for example, in West Africa, the city of Lagos, or in India, Mumbai, to some degree Delhi, are right in the area that becomes, according to this metric, an area now outside of the human climate niche, outside of conditions where the mean average temperature is above 29 degrees C. And that projection would see, using existing population data projections, around 2 billion people, 1/5 of the human population, displaced outside the human climate niche. That's if everyone does agree to succeed in cutting their carbon emissions as they are currently promising to do. That's of that 2 billion, 600 million are projected to be in India, 300 million are projected to be in Nigeria. In the scenario where we don't reduce carbon emissions at all, carbon emissions continue to rise as they have been doing in the past decade. That is our projection for displacement outside the human climate niche by the year 2100. It would see around half the human population, around 5 billion people, displaced outside the human climate niche, and that is a situation that climate scientists term as existential. So the reason for kind of including, I'm really grateful to ADME for including our research in this kind of area of very grounded focus on heat wave mitigation, is that when we look at the bigger picture, unless the kind of the key arena for heat wave death mitigation really is the decarbonisation agenda. It really is the mitigation agenda. If we continue to fail to reduce carbon emissions globally, these are the scenarios. These are the scenarios that we're facing, and all of our kind of attempts at heat wave adaptation are really going to be challenged, beyond existing capacities. And so really just as a kind of way of reflection, I mean, I guess I'm sharing that information really as a kind of way of like thinking, well, while we focus on local action, how do we also advocate at a kind of global level? So yes, decarbonisation is key, and on scale, but really underpinning all of this is a kind of is a paradigm shift in our approach to climate finance, which is really fundamentally an architectural question. We've seen in recent years Barbados, led by Prime Minister Mia Mottley, leading on proposals for what a new architecture for climate finance might look like, with renewed focus on mitigation, and also on adaptation and loss and damage finance. I think that some of the data that I've shared with you really kind of points to how we can go further, and how we really need to look at that dynamic of rising climate vulnerability, rising susceptibility to extreme heat and heat waves, actually driving at the same time as an investment into mitigation on scale, also an investment into vulnerability, where many of the methods that are profiled in the report, planning and preparedness, early warning systems, communication networks, adaptation in the built environment, including ventilation, urban forests, investment in labour conditions that could allow for flexible working times, the provision of drinking water and food, rest arrangements and emergency medical services are also provided alongside like the provision of blended finance, micro insurance, debt suspension. We must understand that chronic poverty is the underlying driver of climate vulnerability, and that actually our investment in a just environment, in one in which we also mitigate against air pollution, water pollution, soil degradation, the reduced biodiversity of species. These are all elements of a kind of holistic package. The architecture for resilience in the face of escalating climate breakdown. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashish. Really very interesting. And last, but also important to connect local to global, global to local. So thank you so much for sharing your perspective. We have limited time, and I would like to selected few questions. One is, what is the reason for female has more vulnerable to heat wave than male? Looking at the higher rate of labor force participation rate among male than female. So maybe Dr. Josipura, may I request to share your perspective on this question?
Vishal bhai, can you repeat the question?
Okay, the higher rate of labor force participation rate among male is higher than the female. So what is the reason for female has more vulnerable to heat wave than male?
So there are multiple reasons to it. A couple of them include the inequality in the distribution of the domestic responsibilities. A lot of time what happens is, even after going back home from work, what happens is these women have to look after their children, the household duties, the cooking responsibilities, and in addition to that, they have to travel long distances in order to cater the resources which are very much required. And at the same time, when it is time for them to be at the work, they cannot compromise that, because there have been cases for which several households, women are the sole breadwinners. So the impact of these heat waves and climate shocks is disproportionate. Additionally, access to resources.
Thank you so much. One another question is zero death toll from heat wave is achievable, especially in the case of India? So may I request our presenter, if anyone would like to respond this question? Hello.
Measures that access to healthcare facilities, drinking water, break stations, adequate access to financing solutions, so that they do not have to choose between staying safe or working in the most vulnerable direct exposure to heat conditions.
Thank you, Dr. Josipura. We missed in between, but we understand, as you may be in the field in the rural area for your action work. So may I request our speaker to respond Mr. Chandan Kumar Swine's question. Is zero death toll from heat wave is achievable? Dr. Saxena, may I request if you can share your... Maybe he left. Okay. Yes, please.
Yeah. So, like this question, I mean, it will be a very ideal situation, I think, if we can come to that point. But let me tell you the recent government data which is there. The one of the reports which I showed, beating the heat. That in that report it is mentioned that I think somewhere in 2022 or 23 we were about 10 deaths in a year. And they have also kind of laid down the strategy which the government took for combating such a situation. So I think if we have some kind of streamlined cooperation between different departments, and at the same time people are aware about how to cope up with such situations, then certainly we can try stringent. Yeah, I think it is quite achievable. But most importantly, it is not, I feel it is not about the deaths per se, but the kind of effect when you are getting affected because of heat wave, or the kind of shock or the kind of morbidity which it can lend to your life. That is, I think, also very important to look at. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have received long list of questions, and I am sure that also a couple of hand raised for the question. But because of time, we ensuring that we have your contact details, and regarding the presentation, we will also share the presentation once the based on the permission from the presenter. Generally, we do share from our webinars with all participants. Now, would like to request Mehul Bhai to please share concluding remarks as well as vote of thanks, please.
Thank you so much, Vishal Bhai. Am I audible?
Yes.
Vishal Bhai, my video is not working. So I will speak, but you won't be able to see me, my face. And I must say, I have the difficult job of concluding the roundtable proceedings. And our speakers have shared so many ideas and insights that we can use to protect lives and livelihoods during heat waves. But 6 to 7 ideas are very important according to me. And I will try to capture or summarize these proceedings in these 6 to 7 ideas. And I would like to begin with what Vishal Bhai said in the beginning. Vishal Bhai pointed out that we must remember that all disaster-related deaths may not be avoidable, but all heat wave-related deaths are avoidable. I think we must stick to this quotation. Second, we heard from Dr. not only affect health and livelihoods, but overall well-being of individuals and households. And within those that are affected, heat waves affect the women and informal sector workers the most. So we must remember that. She also highlighted that communicating this risk faced by women and informal sector workers it is very important to communicate their risks to policymakers and practitioners so that their lives and livelihoods could be protected. And she highlighted the key role of social safety nets to protect women. She highlighted specifically about the role played by microinsurance and savings for household level preparedness. And in the end, she also talked about importance of affordable access to renewable energy and credit. And she also advocated having community grassroots level networks of health workers, and also the provision of telemedicine services and ambulance services, including provision of early warning systems so that women can prepare themselves and their households. So these are 3 to 4 key messages that we take home from the presentation made by Dr. Rajvi Joshipura. Third, we heard from Dr. Nivedita S. Ray Bennett, and she focused on, and she made a very powerful statement that reducing avoidable deaths are social justice. So all those who have signed the Sendai Framework for Action have the responsibility, direct responsibility of ensuring that premature deaths are avoidable. and they must be avoided. And as a civil society and private sector, we should demand a zero casualty policy for heat waves as we have for some other disasters such as cyclones in India. And what this will do is that this will significantly boost efforts and investments in heat wave mitigation and management. And in the end, she talked about the attribution issue, and she explained how difficult it is to attribute deaths directly to heat waves everywhere, not only in India. And such fatalities are often recorded under various indirect causes rather than the heat wave itself. And this issue complicates the true understanding of the heat wave impact on mortality, and it can hinder effective response and prevention measures. So these are 3 to 4 points that we take home from her presentation. And after Dr. Nivedita, we heard from Dr. Nishant Saxena of ICMR, who reminded us how frequency and intensity of heat waves are increasing in India and in neighboring countries such as Pakistan and Bangladesh. He shared examples of how tribal communities of India are using their traditional knowledge and they are overcoming problems of heat waves. And he highlighted that there is a need to study these practices. There is a need to learn from tribal communities and their practices in various sectors such as shelter, architecture, water management, food and dietary practices, and health and healing practices that they are using to protect themselves against extreme heat. And he highlighted that there is a need to collect more data on mortality and morbidity due to heat waves in India. And he also called for creation of and mapping of heat wave vulnerability index to guide our policymakers in the government. Fifth, we heard from Jian Ying Liao from UK, and he talked about sustainable solutions for urban environment. He pointed out that current cooling solutions, such as use of the air conditions, they are not environmental friendly and sustainable. And there are also issues of inequality. So there is a need to use and promote nature-based solutions, and they must be prioritized. And these solutions, they offer several benefits, such as because they are nature-based, they are naturally, they will naturally improve our air quality, they will reduce noise, and they will also have a impact on our mental health. And in the end, he pointed out that there is a need for timely and targeted heat wave early warnings and community engagement and education to protect the vulnerable populations. Last but not the least, we heard from Assis, who talked about heat wave displacements and deaths due to displacements, a topic that we rarely hear or discuss about. He highlighted the challenges of quantifying the human cost of global warming, which often results in inadequate action and compensations at various levels. And he pointed out that we do not have accurate models of estimating cost of global warming. And this is something that we all struggle when it comes to compensating the heat wave affected populations. We don't have a foolproof model or methods of measuring loss and damage. And he suggested and he warned that without concerted efforts, climate-induced displacements are going to be a huge problem for governments and CSOs in coming years. And as a recommendation, he shared an architecture of heat wave death prevention, which was really a combination of investments, technology, blended finance, and tackling environmental issues effectively, such as air pollution, water pollution, arresting soil degradation, and promoting biodiversity. Decentralization and paradigm shifts were the 2 words that he used to reduce risk and heat wave deaths. Vishal, but this is what I could capture from the 6 presentations that were made today. And all these presentations in terms of where all of you. And as a follow-up, we of you, whosoever is interested, are invited to join us and have a joint authorship. And maybe in future, near future, we may also have a full-fledged policy brief on this particular issue. And again, I welcome you all to join us in writing and finalizing such briefs in future. Over to you, Vishal Bhai. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mehul bhai. It's really good coverage and really important aspects that has been covered in this short time. My apologies as it extended from the prefix time duration. Also, thank you for your interest and sharing questions, especially Wakash Kidwai, Dr. Sujata Sonikji, thank you for taking out time to attend this. Fatima, thank you so much. Mohammad Tahir Saab, thank you. Shrikantji, apologies for not having coverage of your question, but as we also would like to convey thanks to Christian, who have shared list of questions, very interesting, and we AID and ADN would like to convey that we will cover this in our post webinar communication work. And as said by Mehul bhai, looking forward for more and concrete joint action. Thank you so much and have a good time.
Thanks a lot.